An entire restaurant mocked a black man. 10 minutes later, no one could lift their head. 10 minutes after an entire restaurant laughed at the black man standing beside table 12, the owner locked the front doors, the head chef dropped his knife, and every customer in the dining room stared down at their plates. No one was smiling anymore. A woman who had called him boy covered her mouth with a trembling hand. A businessman who had demanded that security throw him outside could not look him in the eyes. And the manager, who had insulted him loudly enough for the whole room to hear, stood frozen beneath the golden lights as a police officer placed a sealed evidence bag on the white tablecloth. Inside it was a small silver device. A device that proved the quiet stranger had not come to beg for a meal. He had come to prevent people from dying. But 10 minutes earlier, none of them knew that. 10 minutes earlier, all they saw was the color of his skin. The evening had begun with rain. It fell in thin silver lines across downtown Charleston, washing the sidewalks and turning the streetlights into trembling reflections. Cars pulled beneath the curved awning of Maison Violette, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Inside, everything glowed. Crystal glasses caught the amber light. Candles burned in small brass holders. A pianist played softly near the bar, while waiters moved between tables with white cloths folded over their arms. The restaurant was famous for its French cuisine, its celebrity guests, and its waiting list that stretched for months. People did not simply eat at Maison Violette. They came to be seen. At 7:42 that evening, a man named Marcus Reed stepped through the front doors. He was 51 years old, tall, broad across the shoulders, and dressed in a dark wool coat that had been carefully brushed but clearly worn from many winters. Rain shone on his close-cropped hair. His shoes were polished, though the leather had cracked near the soles. In his right hand, he carried a small black case. The hostess looked up. Her smile vanished. Marcus paused beneath the chandelier and wiped the rain from his forehead with a clean handkerchief. "Good evening," he said. The hostess, a young woman named Claire, looked past him toward the street as though expecting someone else to enter. "Deliveries are in the rear," she said. "I'm not making a delivery." Her eyes dropped to the black case. "Maintenance uses the service entrance." "I'm not maintenance." Claire's expression tightened. Behind her, a silver plaque displayed the evening's private event. The Hawthorne Foundation Charity Dinner a Night for Children's Health. Marcus read the sign. Then he looked toward the dining room. "I need to speak to the manager immediately." Claire gave a short, nervous laugh. The couple waiting behind Marcus shifted impatiently. The man wore a tuxedo. The woman held a pearl-colored clutch. "Is there a problem?" the man asked. Claire smiled apologetically at them. "Just a misunderstanding." Marcus remained calm. "It is not a misunderstanding." His voice was quiet, but there was an urgency beneath it. "I need you to stop dinner service." The hostess stared at him. The couple behind him laughed. "Stop dinner service?" the woman repeated. "Who does he think he is?" Marcus heard her. He did not turn around. Claire lowered her voice. "Sir, you need to leave. Please call your manager." "Do you have a reservation?" "No." "Are you a guest of the foundation?" "No." "Then you cannot enter the dining room." Marcus looked beyond her. Waiters were serving the first course. At the center of the room, a large floral arrangement rose beneath a domed ceiling painted with gold vines. Nearly 100 guests sat at round tables dressed in white linen. The scent of butter, herbs, and roasted garlic floated through the air. Marcus's jaw tightened. "What are they serving?" he asked. Claire blinked. "Excuse me. The first course. That is none of your concern. Is it the seafood bisque?" Her face changed slightly. "How would you know that?" Marcus lifted the black case. "Because I tested the refrigeration unit that stored the shellfish." The couple behind him stopped smiling. Claire folded her arms. "You said you were not maintenance." "I am an independent food safety investigator." She looked at his coat again, then at his face. She did not believe him. Marcus reached into his pocket and removed a laminated identification card. Before Claire could examine it, a man in a navy suit approached from the dining room. His name was Adrian Cole, general manager of Maison Violette. Adrian was 44, lean, perfectly groomed, and known among his staff for smiling at wealthy customers and shouting at everyone else. "What is happening?" he asked. Claire pointed toward Marcus. "He says we need to stop dinner service." Adrian looked him up and down. The inspection lasted less than 2 seconds. That was enough for Adrian to decide what kind of man Marcus was. "Sir," he said, "this is a private event." "I know. You need to leave." Marcus held out his identification card. My name is Marcus Reed. I was sent by the county health department to inspect your emergency refrigeration system this afternoon. Adrian did not take the card. We already passed our inspection. You passed a general inspection 3 months ago. Adrian smiled coldly. And yet we remain open. Marcus glanced toward the dining room. The auxiliary unit behind the seafood walk-in is leaking refrigerant. The temperature sensor is also giving false readings. Adrian's smile weakened. That unit was repaired. No, it was reset. A waiter nearby slowed his steps. Marcus continued. The shellfish delivered this morning may have been held above a safe temperature for several hours. Adrian stepped closer. You should be very careful about making accusations. I am not accusing anyone. I am telling you to stop serving the bisque until the food can be tested. Claire looked toward Adrian. For one brief second, concern entered her face. Adrian noticed. His expression hardened. Do you have a warrant? No. Do you have an official closure order? Not yet. Then you are interrupting a private charity dinner without authority. Marcus inhaled slowly. He had expected resistance. He had not expected an audience. Several guests near the entrance had begun watching. A woman in a red dress whispered to her husband. A young waiter stood still with a tray of soup bowls balanced against his palm. Marcus looked at the bowls. Do not serve those, he said. The waiter froze. Adrian's voice snapped through the lobby. Take them to the table. The waiter hesitated. Marcus stepped forward. Please. The single word carried more urgency than a shout. The waiter looked between the two men. Adrian grabbed the edge of the tray and pushed it gently but firmly toward the dining room. Serve the guests. Marcus reached for his phone. Adrian slapped it from his hand. The phone struck the marble floor. The sound echoed. Conversation stopped. The pianist missed a note. Every face turned toward the entrance. Marcus looked down at his cracked phone. Then he lifted his eyes. Why did you do that? Adrian straightened his jacket. Because you are disturbing my restaurant. A man from table 3 called out. Throw him outside. Several people laughed. Marcus bent and picked up his phone. The screen had split into a spiderweb of glass. He pressed the side button. Nothing happened. Adrian folded his arms. You have 30 seconds to leave. Marcus looked at the nearest bowl of bisque. Steam curled from its pale orange surface. He thought of his younger sister, Denise. 27 years earlier, she had eaten contaminated shellfish at a church banquet. She had been 16. By the time anyone realized how sick she was, her organs were failing. She died 2 days later. Marcus had been 24. He had held her hand in the hospital while machines breathed for her. He remembered the cold blue light, the dry taste in his mouth, the doctor saying that the food had been stored improperly. A mistake. A preventable mistake. That was the phrase Marcus never forgot. Preventable. He spent the next 2 decades studying food systems, refrigeration failures, bacterial growth, and emergency response. He became one of the most respected field investigators in the county. But respect, he had learned, often disappeared when people saw him before they saw his credentials. Marcus turned to the waiter. What is your name? The young man swallowed. Daniel. Daniel, put the tray down. Adrian pointed toward the dining room. Serve the table. Daniel's hand trembled. The bowls rattled against the silver tray. Guests began murmuring. A woman near the center of the room raised her voice. Can someone remove that man? We paid a great deal to be here. Another guest said, he is probably trying to get free food. More laughter. Marcus stood beneath the chandelier while strangers reduced his life to a joke. A man at table 6 leaned toward his companion. Look at the case. He probably sells tools out of his car. A woman answered, maybe he is one of those internet inspectors. Someone else said, he looks homeless. The comments moved through the room like small cuts. None were loud enough to claim responsibility. All were loud enough for Marcus to hear. Adrian smiled because the room was now on his side. You see, he said, you are making people uncomfortable. Marcus looked around at the guests. No, he said. The truth is making you uncomfortable. A few people gasped. Adrian's face reddened. Security. A large guard emerged from a hallway near the kitchen. His name was Evan Brooks. Evan was black, nearly 6'4", with a shaved head and a quiet manner. He had worked at Maison Violette for 2 years. He approached Marcus slowly. Their eyes met. Marcus saw the apology in Evan's face before the guard spoke. Sir, I need you to come with me. Marcus glanced at the tray. Daniel still held it. Please put the soup down. Adrian stepped between them. That is enough. He turned toward the dining room and raised his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. This individual has no authority to interfere with your evening. A man near the stage lifted his wine glass. Then get him out. Applause began at one table. Then another. Within seconds, nearly half the restaurant was clapping. Not for music. Not for charity. For the removal of a black man who had asked them not to eat. Marcus stood completely still. The applause washed over him. Some guests smiled. Some filmed him with their phones. One woman whispered, "This is going viral." Marcus did not shout. He did not insult them. He did not beg. He looked at Adrian and spoke in a voice steady enough to make the manager uneasy. If you serve that soup and someone becomes ill, you will remember this moment for the rest of your life. Adrian leaned close. And you will remember being escorted out of my restaurant. Evan placed a hand near Marcus's elbow but did not touch him. Sir. Marcus nodded. He picked up his black case. Then he turned toward the doors. The laughter began again. A teenage boy at table 9 imitated Marcus's serious voice. Stop the soup, he said dramatically. His father laughed and patted him on the shoulder. A woman called out, maybe he wants a tip. Someone dropped a coin on the floor. It rolled across the marble and stopped near Marcus's shoe. The room erupted. Marcus looked down at the coin. For 1 second, pain moved across his face. Not anger. Pain. Evan saw it. So did Daniel. The waiter slowly lowered the tray onto a side table. Adrian spun toward him. What are you doing? My hand slipped, Daniel said. It did not slip. Daniel looked at Marcus. Then at the soup. I don't think we should serve it. The room quieted slightly. Adrian's face hardened. You are a waiter. Yes, sir. Then wait tables. Daniel's cheeks burned. Adrian picked up one of the bowls himself. He carried it to table 12 and set it in front of Evelyn Hawthorne, the 73-year-old founder of the charity hosting the event. Evelyn was elegant, silver-haired, and dressed in dark green silk. She looked at the soup, then at Marcus, who had stopped near the doors. Is there really a safety concern? She asked. Adrian smiled. No, Mrs. Hawthorne. There is a man creating a scene. Marcus turned. There is a serious concern. Evelyn studied him. What evidence do you have? At last, someone had asked the right question. Marcus lifted the black case. Temperature logs, refrigerant readings, and a sample from the drainage line beneath the unit. Adrian's expression changed. Only slightly. But Marcus saw it. So you entered our kitchen without permission? Adrian asked. I was invited by your executive chef. Every head turned toward the kitchen doors. Adrian laughed too quickly. That is impossible. Marcus looked toward the back of the room. Ask Chef Laurent. The kitchen doors remained closed. Adrian raised his voice. Chef Laurent is preparing dinner for 100 guests. He does not have time for this performance. Marcus's eyes stayed on the doors. Call him. Adrian did not. That told Marcus everything. The manager knew more than he had admitted. Evelyn Hawthorne pushed her bowl away. Mr. Cole, call the chef. Adrian forced a smile. Mrs. Hawthorne, I assure you, call him. The authority in her voice silenced the room. Adrian hesitated. Then the kitchen doors opened. Chef Laurent Moreau stepped into the dining room. He was 60, heavy-set, and pale beneath the kitchen lights. Sweat darkened his collar. His left hand was wrapped in a white towel. When he saw Marcus, relief crossed his face. Then he saw Adrian. The relief vanished. Chef, Evelyn said. Did you invite this man? Laurent looked at the guests. At the cameras. At Adrian. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Marcus spoke gently. Tell them what you found. Adrian stepped toward the chef. Be careful. The warning was quiet. But the nearest tables heard it. Laurent lowered his eyes. This afternoon, he said, the walk-in temperature increased. A murmur moved through the room. How high? Evelyn asked. Laurent swallowed. 54 degrees. A woman dropped her spoon. The safe cold storage threshold had been exceeded by far. Marcus opened the black case. Inside were printed logs, a digital thermometer, a sample container, and a small silver data recorder. I was called at 4:16, Marcus said. By Chef Laurent. Adrian turned toward the chef. You called the county? I called Marcus privately. Why? Because the display showed 38 degrees, but the shellfish felt warm. Marcus placed a printed graph on the nearest table. The sensor had been manipulated to display a false reading. The room went still. Adrian's face lost color. Evelyn looked at him. Manipulated by whom? Marcus did not answer immediately. He connected the silver recorder to a tablet from his case. A timeline appeared. At 11:32 that morning, the refrigeration system had issued a high-temperature alarm. At 11:37, someone entered the administrator code. At 11:39, the alarm limit was manually disabled. At 11:41, the display was reset to show a false temperature. Marcus enlarged the access record. The administrator account belonged to Adrian Cole. The restaurant seemed to lose all sound. Even the rain against the windows felt distant. Adrian stared at the screen. That proves nothing. Marcus looked at him. It proves you disabled a safety alarm. I was told the sensor was faulty. By whom? Our contractor. Name him. Adrian said nothing. Marcus reached into the case and removed a folded invoice. You canceled the emergency repair call at 12:14. The manager's breathing changed. How did you get that? The refrigeration company sent it to the health department after I requested the service history. Adrian looked toward the doors. They suddenly seemed very far away. Evelyn Hawthorne stood. Why would you cancel a repair? Adrian's voice became defensive. Because the dining room was booked. The foundation had already paid the deposit. We had press here. Donors. Investors. You risked our health to protect one dinner? It was not a risk. Marcus pointed toward the bowls. The shellfish remained in the danger zone for almost 5 hours. Adrian turned on him. You cannot prove contamination. No, Marcus said. Not yet. A few guests exhaled. Then Marcus added, but we can prove that you knew the food was unsafe to serve. He lifted the sample container. And preliminary testing from the drainage line shows bacterial growth consistent with spoiled seafood. A woman at table 4 pushed back from the table so quickly that her chair fell. Panic spread. Guests stared at their bowls. Some stood. Others grabbed their phones. One man shouted, I tasted it. Another asked, should we call an ambulance? Evelyn raised her voice. Everyone remained calm. But calm had already left the room. Adrian pointed at Marcus. He is trying to destroy this restaurant. Marcus's expression remained steady. I tried to stop the soup before anyone ate it. The words struck every person who had mocked him. The woman in the red dress looked down. The businessman who had demanded Marcus be thrown outside slowly lowered his wine glass. The teenage boy at table 9 stared at his father. No one laughed. Then a guest near table 12 began coughing. Her name was Margaret Ellis. She was 68 and had eaten 2 spoonfuls of bisque before Evelyn asked for the chef. Margaret pressed a hand against her throat. Her face turned red. Her husband stood in panic. She has a shellfish allergy, he said. Adrian rushed forward. The menu states that it contains shellfish. She ordered the vegetarian first course. Everyone turned toward the bowl. Daniel looked horrified. That is table 12, he whispered. I was carrying the vegetarian soups. Marcus moved before anyone else. He crossed the dining room and knelt beside Margaret. Does she carry epinephrine? Her husband searched her purse with shaking hands. I can't find it. Margaret's breathing became a high, thin whistle. Her lips began to swell. Marcus looked at Daniel. Emergency kit. Daniel ran. Adrian stood frozen. Marcus loosened the scarf around Margaret's neck. Stay with me, he said. She clawed weakly at her throat. The guests who had applauded Marcus's removal now watched him take control of the room. Call emergency services, he ordered. Several people reached for their phones. Evelyn did too. Daniel returned with a red medical kit. Marcus opened it. Inside was an epinephrine auto-injector. He checked the label, removed the safety cap, and pressed it firmly against Margaret's outer thigh. The device clicked. Margaret gasped. Time, Marcus said. 7:51, Daniel answered. Good. Tell paramedics epinephrine was administered at 7:51. Marcus kept one hand on Margaret's shoulder. Slow breaths. Help is coming. Her husband knelt beside them, crying. You saved her. Marcus looked at the bowl. No. We caught it in time. Chef Laurent picked up a spoon and examined the soup. This is the seafood bisque. Daniel's eyes widened. But I put the vegetarian tray on the side table. Adrian said nothing. Marcus turned toward him. What happened to the bowls? Everyone followed his gaze. Adrian stepped backward. No one knows. Daniel stared at the manager. You moved them. Adrian's face tightened. You were refusing service. You moved the seafood bowls onto my tray. I was trying to keep dinner moving. You almost killed her. The sentence broke something in the room. Sirens sounded outside. Blue light swept across the rain-covered windows. Two paramedics entered with police officers behind them. They moved quickly to Margaret. Marcus gave them the time of injection, her symptoms, and the suspected allergen. One paramedic nodded. You did exactly the right thing. Adrian looked toward the police. This is a private business matter. One of the officers, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, stepped forward. Not anymore. She knew Marcus. They had worked together on 2 previous food tampering cases. Did you secure the data? She asked. Marcus pointed to the silver recorder. Yes. Adrian's shoulders sagged. Lieutenant Kim placed the device in an evidence bag. That was the moment the restaurant finally understood. The man they had called homeless was not a trespasser. The man they had accused of wanting free food was a county investigator. The man they had applauded while security escorted him away had warned them about a crime. And while they mocked him, he had still chosen to save one of them. The silence became unbearable. No one could lift their head. Evan, the security guard, stood near the entrance with tears in his eyes. He removed his earpiece. Mr. Reed, he said, I'm sorry. Marcus looked at him. You were doing your job. Evan shook his head. No. I was obeying a man I knew was wrong because I was afraid to lose my job. Marcus studied him for a moment. That fear is real. Evan lowered his eyes. But so is the harm we do when we let fear make our choices. Evan nodded. Claire stepped out from behind the hostess stand. Her face was wet with tears. I did not even look at your identification. Marcus said nothing. I saw you and assumed you belonged at the back door. Her voice cracked. I am sorry. The woman in the red dress stood. I laughed. Across the room, another guest spoke. So did I. The businessman near table 3 cleared his throat. I asked them to throw you out. The admissions came slowly, one after another. I filmed you. I called you a beggar. I dropped the coin. The last confession came from an older man. Near the bar. He stared at the floor. The coin still lay near the entrance. No one had picked it up. Marcus looked around the room. He saw shame on nearly every face. Some were ashamed because they had been wrong about the danger. Others were ashamed because they finally understood that the danger had never been the only issue. Even if Marcus had been mistaken, they had humiliated him. Even if he had not been an investigator, they had denied him dignity. Even if he had been poor, lost, or hungry, their laughter would still have been cruel. Evelyn Hawthorne walked toward him. I owe you an apology, she said. You asked for evidence. I should have asked sooner. Marcus looked at her. You asked when everyone else wanted me silent. That is not enough. No, he said. But it mattered. Lieutenant Kim approached Adrian. We need you to come with us. He looked around desperately. This is being exaggerated. Chef Laurent stepped forward. No, Adrian turned toward him. The chef removed the towel from his hand. A deep cut crossed his palm. You threatened to fire me if I called the health department, Laurent said. Adrian's lips parted. You told me to serve the seafood. When I refused, you grabbed the knife from my hand. The room reacted with shock. Lieutenant Kim looked at the injury. When did this happen? 20 minutes ago. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The chef had been trapped in the kitchen while Adrian publicly denied calling him. A police officer moved behind Adrian. The manager looked at Marcus. You did this. Marcus met his eyes. No, Adrian's voice rose. You came here to ruin me. You disabled the alarm. You brought the police. You threatened your chef. You turned everyone against me. Marcus's voice stayed calm. The truth did that. Adrian looked around for support. No one met his gaze. Not Claire. Not Evan. Not the guests. Not even the owner of the restaurant, who had just arrived from the upstairs office. Her name was Juliette Beaumont. She had inherited Maison Violette from her father and trusted Adrian to run daily operations. She stood near the bar, pale and shaking. How long? She asked. Adrian looked at her. Juliette, how long have you been falsifying safety records? He said nothing. Marcus opened another document. At least 8 months. Juliette gripped the back of a chair. He had canceled repairs, altered logs, reused expired ingredients, and threatened employees who objected. He had done it to reduce costs before the restaurant's planned sale to an investment group. The charity dinner had been his final chance to impress the buyers. Marcus had discovered the pattern only because Chef Lauren's private call led him to compare service invoices with digital temperature records. The contamination was not an accident. It was the result of greed dressed as efficiency. Juliette looked at the dining room her family had owned for 46 years. My father built this place, she whispered. Marcus answered quietly. Then honor him by telling the truth about what happened here. She looked at him. He could have humiliated her. He could have told the press that she was careless. He could have watched the restaurant collapse and felt justified. Instead, he gave her a choice. Juliet straightened. She turned to Lieutenant Kim. You will have full access to every record. Adrian stared at her. You cannot do this. I should have done it months ago. You will lose everything. Juliet looked toward Margaret, who was being lifted onto a stretcher. Then I will lose what I failed to protect. The paramedics rolled Margaret toward the doors. Her husband stopped beside Marcus. He took Marcus's hand in both of his. I mocked you, he said. Marcus remembered him. The man had laughed when the coin rolled across the floor. I know. My wife is alive because of you. Marcus looked toward the stretcher. Go with her. The man began to cry. I don't know how to ask you to forgive me. You don't ask for forgiveness while your wife needs you. Marcus gently pulled his hand free. Go. The man nodded and hurried after the stretcher. Adrian was escorted away. As he passed Marcus, his eyes were filled with hatred, fear, and something close to disbelief. He had expected the black man to become angry. He had expected shouting, threats, revenge. Marcus gave him none of those things. He simply stepped aside. The front doors closed behind the police. Rain continued to fall. Inside, the soup cooled untouched. The candles still burned. The piano remained silent. The guests stood among overturned chairs and half-finished wine. The room that had felt so powerful 10 minutes earlier now seemed small. Evelyn Hawthorne walked to the stage. She faced the guests. This evening was meant to raise money for children's health, she said. Instead, we became a room full of adults who ignored a warning because we did not respect the man giving it. No one moved. We judged his clothing, his position, his skin. The teenage boy at table 9 looked down. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, but the boy moved away. Evelyn continued. We believed wealth made us wise. It did not. She turned toward Marcus. What should we do? The question surprised him. The entire restaurant waited. Marcus looked at the empty bowls. At Daniel. At Chef Lawrence's injured hand. At Evan's abandoned earpiece. At Claire standing near the front desk. Then he looked at the charity sign. Feed the people who need food, he said. Evelyn frowned slightly. Marcus pointed toward the kitchen. The seafood must be destroyed. But the vegetables, bread, packaged goods, and sealed ingredients can be inspected and donated. Juliet nodded quickly. To shelters. To shelters, clinics, and night workers. He looked around the room. And everyone here who laughed should help carry the boxes. The guests stared at him. Some seemed surprised. Perhaps they had expected punishment. Perhaps they expected a speech about racism. Marcus did not need to deliver one. The work would say what words could not. Evelyn removed her diamond bracelet and placed it inside her purse. Then she rolled up the sleeves of her silk dress. Show us where to begin. Within an hour, the dining room changed. White tablecloths were stripped. Boxes were brought from storage. Guests who had arrived in limousines carried bread, rice, canned goods, bottled water, and sealed produce through the rain. The businessman who had demanded Marcus's removal carried 2 crates to a community clinic van. The woman in the red dress packed meals. Beside Claire, the older man who had dropped the coin worked silently near the kitchen entrance. At one point, he bent down and picked the coin up from the marble floor. He held it in his palm for a long time. Then he placed it in a donation jar. Not as payment. As a reminder. Daniel stayed close to Marcus. My mother always tells me not to risk my job, he said. She wants you safe. She would have told me to serve the soup. Marcus shook his head. No. She would have told you to survive. Sometimes people confuse survival with obedience. Daniel looked toward the kitchen. I was afraid. You still put the tray down. Too late. Marcus looked at him. But you put it down. Chef Laurent approached with his bandaged hand. I should have called the police. Yes. I thought I could control Adrian. You could not. I let fear make me weak. Marcus studied the old chef. Fear does not make you weak. Laurent looked up. What you do after fear arrives tells people who you are. The chef nodded slowly. Juliet announced that Maison Violette would close indefinitely. Every employee would continue receiving wages during the investigation. An independent safety board would be formed. She also promised that no worker would be punished for reporting violations. Marcus listened. Then he said, put it in writing. She did. By midnight, the last donation van left the restaurant. The rain had softened to mist. Only a few people remained. Evelyn stood near the front windows. "Mrs. Ellis is stable," she said. Her husband called from the hospital. Relief moved through the room. Marcus closed his black case. Juliet approached him. "I want you to lead the safety investigation. I already work for the county. Then advise us independently when the case is closed." Marcus shook his head. "I am not the person you need." "Who is?" He looked toward Daniel, Laurent, Evan, and Claire, the people who were afraid to speak. Juliet followed his gaze. "Build a system where they do not need courage just to tell the truth." She absorbed the words. Then she nodded. Months passed. Adrian Cole pleaded guilty to evidence tampering, reckless endangerment, and falsifying public health records. Maison Violette remained closed for nearly a year. Many expected it never to reopen. But Juliet kept her promise. The restaurant was rebuilt from the inside. Not the walls. The culture. Employees elected their own safety representatives. Any worker could stop service without a manager's permission if they suspected contamination or danger. Anonymous reporting systems were installed. Training sessions included not only food safety but dignity, bias, and the responsibility to listen before judging. Claire returned as a community outreach coordinator after completing months of training. Evan became head of staff protection and employee advocacy. Daniel enrolled in a public health program with a scholarship funded by the Hawthorne Foundation. Chef Laurent returned to the kitchen, but every refrigerator alarm was connected directly to an independent monitoring service. And near the entrance, where the silver coin had rolled across the marble, Juliet placed a small bronze plaque. It did not mention Marcus by name. He had refused. The plaque read, "Listen before you judge that dignity may be carrying the warning that saves you." 1 year after the night of the dinner, Maison Violette reopened. The chandeliers still glowed. The candles still burned. But the front door stood open. There was no private gala, no velvet rope. The first evening was reserved for nurses, sanitation workers, bus drivers, shelter volunteers, kitchen staff, and families from the neighborhood. Marcus received an invitation. He almost did not go. He did not enjoy ceremonies. He did not want applause. But Denise's birthday was approaching, and he had spent the week thinking about the sister he could not save. So he put on the same dark coat. He polished the same old shoes. And he carried the same black case. When he entered the restaurant, Claire looked up from the front desk. For one brief second, the old evening seemed to return. The rain, the chandelier, the suspicion. Then Claire smiled. Not the careful smile she once used for wealthy guests. A real one. "Good evening, Mr. Reed." "Good evening. You are expected." Marcus looked toward the dining room. Every employee stood near the tables. Juliet was beside them. Evelyn Hawthorne sat near the stage with Margaret Ellis, fully recovered. Margaret rose and walked toward Marcus. The room became quiet. She held out her hand. "Thank you for my life." Marcus took it. "You are welcome." Her husband stood behind her. He did not speak. He simply lowered his head. Marcus placed one hand on his shoulder. The man looked up, surprised. There was no dramatic forgiveness. No speech. Only a small act of mercy. That was enough. Dinner began. Marcus sat beside sanitation workers and nursing assistants. Daniel, now studying epidemiology, served the first course. Before placing the bowl in front of Marcus, he smiled. Temperature checked twice. Marcus examined the soup. Only twice. Daniel laughed. The room joined him. This time, the laughter carried no cruelty. Near the end of the evening, Juliet walked onto the stage. She held a microphone. Marcus immediately shook his head. "No speeches about me." The guest smiled. Juliet lowered the microphone. Then only one sentence. He waited. "This restaurant survived because the man we refused to respect still chose to protect us." The room rose. Marcus remained seated. Applause filled the dining room. But unlike the applause 1 year earlier, this did not push him toward a door. It welcomed him through one. Marcus looked around at the faces. Some had mocked him. Some had doubted him. Some had remained silent while others humiliated him. Now their eyes were filled with regret. But regret alone did not move him. What moved him was what had grown from it. Daniel's scholarship, Evan's new role, the safety systems, the open reporting policy, the meals served to workers who had once been expected to use back entrances. The restaurant had not erased what happened. It had allowed the memory to change what happened next. Marcus stood. The applause faded. He looked toward the kitchen doors. Warm light spilled across the floor. "For years," he said, "I believed the worst thing people could do was refuse to listen. The room was silent. I was wrong. He placed one hand on the black case. The worst thing is learning the truth and refusing to change. No one moved. Marcus looked at Claire, at Juliet, at Evan, at Daniel, at the guests. You changed. His voice softened. Keep changing. Then he sat down. Outside, rain began tapping gently against the windows. Inside, Daniel carried a tray toward a table of hospital cleaners still wearing their uniforms after a long shift. Claire opened the front door for a family arriving late. Evan helped an elderly man remove his wet coat. Chef Laurent checked the temperature display, recorded the reading, and smiled. Marcus watched them. Beside his plate lay a small silver coin. The older man from the first dinner had placed it there before leaving. A note was folded beneath it. Marcus opened the paper. It contained only 5 words. I finally saw what I was. Marcus closed his hand around the coin. Then he looked through the window. The clouds were separating. Across the wet street, morning light began to appear between the buildings. He placed the coin beside the candle. Its surface caught the light. No one spoke. No one needed to. The restaurant continued serving dinner while the quiet glow spread across the room, touched every table, and rested for a moment on the face of the man they had once refused to see.